we'll be discussing some capabilities of ENCODE Design Life tool to perform frequency domain fatigue calculations in today's webinar. So a little bit about ourselves. Prencia is the software arm of HBK, where we leverage the unique competence of two software brands, ENCODE and RelySoft. They both deliver a more complete lifecycle solution, with ENCODE tailoring towards fatigue and durability and some signal processing capabilities, and RelySoft focuses on reliability, warranty, and some statistical analysis. So we offer a lot of training courses in the broad areas of fatigue and durability, and we also offer a whole bunch of consulting services, and we have a full-fledged material testing lab in our UK office. So this is the Prencia software portfolio in both RelySoft and ENCODE. So the leftmost column is contains tools for reliability analysis, failure data analysis, test planning, and system modeling. So the column in the middle contains reliability management. Here we manage risks, do maintenance and actions. And on the right-hand side, we have ENCODE related tools, with the first one here, Design Life, which is a CAE-based fatigue analysis tool. So this can accept results from various FE platforms and perform fatigue analysis. We have CliffWorks, which is a test data analysis and durability tool. So that can accept data from a lot of sensors and process the data. We have VIPESYS, which is a vibration and acoustic based analysis tools. And we have Akira, which is a web-based tool, which is our next generation tool that was just released a couple of years back. So in today's talk, we'll mainly focus on the Design Life tool and how it can help us with fatigue calculations in the frequency domain. So with that, we'll get into the webinar today, which is looking at frequency domain fatigue calculations using the ENCODE Design Life tool. So here is the agenda for today. We start with a simple introduction to dynamic fatigue analysis. So we'll look at what are the different approaches out there, why do we even care about dynamic fatigue analysis, and what's the right approach to pick given a situation. So we'll briefly introduce those concepts. Then we briefly need to talk about this idea of stationary versus transient concept, because this becomes important in terms of the selection of the right approach, especially when we are looking at something in the lines of PSDs, which is one of the topics we'll get to in more detail later today. So we need to understand this concept for us to understand what kind of time series data would become a good candidate for a PSD. So we'll briefly touch upon that concepts. And then we'll take a deeper dive into the actual dynamic fatigue calculations in the frequency domain. We'll pick a couple of standard ones like ScienceSweep and random PSDs, which are more popularly used. And then once we cover the concepts, we'll end our webinar with a small demo on one of the topics, and then we'll do a quick summary and open it up for Q&A towards the end. So with that, let's start with the dynamic fatigue introduction. So this is a classic fatigue analysis roadmap across all the different fatigue analysis that one could think of. So we refer to this like a 5-box trick, where the first 3 boxes over here are the inputs. So for any fatigue analysis, we need geometry information, which generally in the case of Design Life comes from FE results. So this could be packages like ANSYS, Abacus, Nastran, OptiStruct, LSDyn, any one of them, which is going to provide us with the structural response. So that's going to give us the geometry information. And then ENCODE would need fatigue curves, which is us telling ENCODE whether we're doing a stress life calculation or a strain life calculation. That's SN and EN. And then we have to define fatigue cycles, which is where we take care of the third box, loading. Okay, so all these 3 boxes form as an input, and then we do our fatigue analysis in here. That could be on parent metal, on welds, on composites, any component of different material system that we have at our disposal, and then we take a look at the results. Okay. So this is a standard flow chart for typically any fatigue analysis that one comes across. Now, if we take a look at this first box over here, the structural response, so this takes us back to what kind of analysis would we be doing at the FE level. So we can take a couple of routes. So we can either do a simple static, a quasi-static analysis, which is probably the oldest and well-established approach. So under that, we could do like simple constant amplitude cycles. That's the simplest fatigue cycle that one can think of, which is just a simple peak and a valley, like a max and a min. Or we can do simple block cycles, which are just a concatenation of many constant amplitude cycles. So think of it like a large cycle, medium, and small cycles. So all of it put together would probably sequence a form of a block cycle. So these are a couple of standard cycle arrangements that we might use in a quasi-static environment. Now, if we take the bottom route, which is when we start including dynamics, so we have one route where we can go through the transient domain, which is in the time domain. And this is one popular way of doing things. And the other one, under certain circumstances, when the response meets certain conditions, which is steady state, which we'll talk about a little later in more depth. We have a couple of frequency domain related approaches like random PSD and sine sweep, which are very popular. Okay, so this is kind of giving you a big picture roadmap of how we can go the quasi-static or the dynamic route. Now, we ask ourselves a question, why do we even care about this dynamics? Why is this so important? Okay, so the reason we care about dynamics is going back to our vibrations class. So we might have seen this equation where any system or any component that we encounter in our real life has got some mass, some stiffness, and some damping. So this is a very famous wide fatigue equation. So if we take a very simple case, like a single degree of freedom system, and if I were to excite it, and if it has got a natural frequency, so it tends to have a very large displacement or a stress around that natural frequency. So if my input loading is very close to the natural frequency of the structure, I might expect a big displacement or a response from that structure. So let's say I have a natural frequency at about of the structure. The first natural frequency is sitting at about 100 hertz. Now, if all my input loads are probably about 30 hertz or lower, so that's all my input excitation, then most of the response from the structure is governed by stiffness. So we can probably get away by doing a simple static analysis, which is computationally easy to perform in the FE world. Now, if my input loading is quite close to the natural frequency, so let's say around the 100 hertz, then most of my response is governed by damping. So that's when I would start seeing a big spike in the stresses and in the displacement. And how fast it fades away or how peaky the response is mainly governed by how much damping the structure is going to absorb. That's the way it would dissipate the energy. And then if my input frequencies are really large, so that means they are so fast that the structure is not able to respond with stiffness or with like damping effects. So it's mainly driven by mass or inertia effects. Okay. So this is the reason why we consider dynamics, because we have all these aspects interacting depending on what my input loads are. So if my input loads are close to the natural frequency, then we need to be accounting for all those aspects in our fatigue calculations. So this is where dynamics becomes important. And now if we look at the different approaches out there, so we have approaches in the time domain, we have approaches in the frequency domain. So this is just giving you like a one slide overview of all the different approaches. So if you look at the time domain approach here, so one of the widely used approaches is this approach called direct transient, also referred to as the full method. So here this can handle all kinds of nonlinearity. So if you have contact, if you have material nonlinearity, geometric nonlinearity, we can handle all of that in a direct transient analysis. So what we are looking at is actual time series loading. So which is let's say a load as a function of time that's going in as an input to the FE. We can get stresses or displacement or accelerations as a function of time output from the FE analysis. Now, the issue with this is, though it can do all the nonlinear capabilities, it has got everything built in, each loading event. So if I'm dealing with different events, each one of them has to be separately analyzed. Though the setup is easy on the FE, it is computationally very expensive if you're dealing with large time histories and many events. So that's one of the reasons why the direct method might not be popular when you're dealing with a lot of events. So you have the other approach called the modal transient in the time domain side of things. The advantage here is you have to do a little more work on the FE, but it is a linear FE analysis. So all we are looking at here is trying to represent the structural behavior using normal modes and its participation factors. And the hope is if we combine all the modes with their participation factors, the idea is to represent the exact motion that the component might have seen in the field. So the big advantage is, since it's a linear FE analysis, it's computationally much more efficient on the FE side. And we can also do modal filtering. That is, if I'm dealing with, let's say, 50 or 100 modes, and I know some of the modes are not going to be very significant, we can actually throw away those modes if they're not going to influence the fatigue life or the damage as such. So that's one of the advantages of modal transient over the direct transient. So these two are the popular approaches under time domain. We can also handle things in the frequency domain, which is what we're going to talk about in today's topic. So we can do one route, which is the direct FRF route. So in this case, we are doing the FFT calculations in the FE packages like ANSYS, Abacus, or Nastran, where the FE packages are going to give us complex stresses. That is actual FRFs, which has got the real part and the imaginary part for every loading direction or the excitation direction that we performed in the FE. And these results can be used inside ENCODE to handle, like, for example, random PSD calculations, sign sweep, signed well, sign on random. So ENCODE can handle any one of these along with the FRF results from the FE codes. There is also, like how we saw the modal transient in the time domain, there is also the modal approach on the frequency domain side of things. So we can use modal stresses and modal coordinates in the frequency domain to build FRFs inside Design Life. So we'll briefly talk about this in one slide later in the talk today. So this is the overall roadmap, and we'll be focusing on the frequency domain calculations for this talk. So before we get into the actual frequency domain calculations, I want to briefly talk about this section, which is referring to stationarity versus transient time series. So this is a concept important to understand because we are trying to answer this question. So when somebody gives us an acceleration or a displacement time series signal, so the question we ask ourselves is, can every time series signal be transformed to a PST? You'll see at the end of this section, the answer is probably no. We cannot. So there's a common myth that we can take any time series signal and convert to a PST, and that's not quite the case. So just to give you a background on the PST, if you're new towards this topic, so what PST is essentially the power content of a signal as a function of frequency. Okay, so let's say we have some measured accelerations that look like this. Now this time series signal has got a lot of hidden frequencies behind, which is not evident when you just look at the signal in the time domain. So what Fourier, a French mathematician, came up with is, he looked at, can this time series signal, let's say we are looking at this solid line over here on the picture, so can this be represented with a whole bunch of sine waves of different amplitudes and frequencies? So what Fourier suggested was this expression, mathematical expression, which has got sine and cosine waves of different amplitudes and frequency, where A is the amplitude and omega is the frequency. Can we sum up many of these to represent this signal? And any representation, any sine wave that has got a significant influence is going to have a big peaky response in the PST profile. So this figure on the right is basically G squared, which is the power content as a function of frequency. So if this particular signal, when we run an FFT algorithm like this behind the scenes, says that some frequencies like 20 and 10 hertz are significant, so that's going to have a peaky response in here. So that's what essentially PSD tells us, is what kind of power content is in the signal. Okay, so the question we ask ourselves is, can any time series signal be converted to a PSD? So we'll look at a couple of examples in the next few slides to see if that is the case. So when we say a time series signal is converted to a PSD, there is an underlying assumption that we make. So when a PSD is constructed, we assume that the original time series signal was random, it was Gaussian in nature, and it was stationary. So the idea of the stationary is basically, if I take chunks of data, so let's say if I have a time series signal that looks like this, if I take a chunk between 1 and 2 seconds, and then later on I go between 8 and 9 seconds, are the two chunks very similar in nature? That means, are the characteristics not significantly changing with time? So if the characteristics and statistics do not change significantly with time, we check this box that it is stationary. And we have checks for random and Gaussian, which is well-established math principles. So this idea here, the stationarity is a little tricky to establish. So we'll just show you a couple of examples of, if I have a time series signal that is, something like this at the top versus this, how they would look like when we do, let's say, a FFT calculation, and we take it to the frequency domain and we bring it back to time domain by doing an inverse FFT to see if we get the original signal back. So let's take a look at a couple of examples. So we'll start with this signal here, where I'm doing a simple FFT calculation with the same math equations that I was showing you a couple of slides back. So once we do the FFT calculation, this would tell us the frequency content behind the scenes. And now if I were to do an inverse FFT calculation, if I roughly get the original signal back, so that means this is meeting all the three requirements of random, Gaussian, and stationarity. And which makes sense because this looks like a signal which would meet all those conditions. So you can roughly see the magnitudes are similar. And now we would approve such a signal for a PSD conversion. Now, if you look at a signal like this, which is by just looking at the signal, we could see somewhere between 0 and 20 seconds, and this chunk over here between about 25 to 40 seconds looks similar. But if you look at the small chunk between the 20 and 30 seconds, so they look like they have a different statistics or characteristics compared to the original part of the signal. So if I were to repeat this process and look at the signal that I get back, so you can see it kind of looks different compared to where we started off. So if you look at the magnitudes and the way the signal looks, so it's slightly different. So this is, right now we are in kind of a shady region where we are not sure whether this could be a good candidate for PSD. And if you look at a signal like this, which is very transient in nature, so if I look at around 40 seconds, the statistics of this is completely different than what it is at about 120 or 130 seconds. So if I were to do the same math here, so you can see we are looking at apples and oranges. So this is completely different from where we started off. So clearly this signal does not make a good candidate for stationarity requirements. So basically the summary is, when we are looking at PSD, so we imply that the time series signal is random, Gaussian, and stationary. Okay, and it's important to check these boxes to understand whether a particular time series signal will make a good candidate to be a PSD, so that we can take the frequency domain route and do those calculations. So if they are not stationary, there's a good chance we might lose out on this peak information and amplitudes, which is very important for fatigue, because we know stress range is what drives fatigue. So if we don't capture the range correctly, we don't get the life and damage. And it's a log-log relationship. So a small change in stress is going to be a huge change in life. So that's why it's necessary to understand what kind of original time series signals were employed to create the PSDs. If this was used to create a PSD, I probably wouldn't trust it compared to a signal that was excitation that was created against this. Okay, so this is a brief concept of the stationarity versus transient background. Now, sometimes we might have to do some conditioning, because when you take a look at the entire time series signal, maybe sections of them put together could mimic similar behavior. So if we take a look at this example, so let's say we have the red signal, which is the master signal, so the main driving force. So we could have this chunk and this chunk might look similar, and the first, third, and the fifth chunks might look similar. So maybe the first, third, and fifth together could form one PSD, and the second and the fourth either together or maybe independently could form a different PSD. So there is a good chance we might have to take the original event and break it down into sub-events, so that each sub-event could be put together as individual PSDs and then concatenated inside ENCODE to deal with the entire event. So we have capabilities in ENCODE to do this. We'll briefly talk about how to do this by looking at PSDs and CPSDs a little later on in this talk. But this is possible for us to take the original time series signal and split it up into individual chunks so that they all meet or satisfy the random Gaussian and stationarity requirements. So that's the idea of the stationarity versus transient concept. And now we'll get into the frequency domain calculations, so how it happens behind the scenes in ENCODE. So if you look at the different examples out there in terms of actual applications, so we look at a typical harmonic case, which is very common with the auto and the aero industry, especially with the engine and powertrain. So if we take, like, for example, a four-stroke six-cylinder engine, we know exactly when it would fire. So these are classic harmonic examples where you can represent them with like exact sine tones and know exactly when they're going to fire and what kind of responses we would expect. And that's similar with the jet engine, with based on the certain RPM, how it would rotate. Sometimes many of these components which are in use will also experience random loading. So like, for example, an aircraft flying, so it's going to see a lot of wind gusts depending on where it's flying and at what altitude it's flying. Similarly, a car going on the road, depending on whether it's driving on a highway versus a countryside road, it's going to see different road loads coming in. So that would be a great example for a random case. So typically road loads are a good example for a random case. And then you have some special cases where you have sine tones on top of random loading. So the classic example would be like a helicopter. So when the helicopter is about to take off or it's flying, so it's going to see a lot of the wind loading, and also the blades here are rotating at certain frequencies. So those are specific sine tones based on the RPMs that are overlapped based on the random loading. So that's called a sine on random application. So in ENCODE, we can handle all of this. So we might not have time to talk about all the cases, but we'll definitely talk about a couple of them to get an idea of how things work inside ENCODE. So for any of these frequency domain calculations, so one of the magic glyphs that we use inside ENCODE is this vibration CAE glyph. So when I show the software demo, I'll show you where you can find this. So this glyph accepts certain inputs. So the green pad here is where the FE results come in. So this is coming in from like ANSYS, Nastran, OptiStruct, or Abacus. So if you're doing an FRF calculation, so the first option we're looking at here is what we call a direct FRF calculation. That is, you're solving for complex stresses in FE for unit excitation loading. So this loading could be in X, Y, and Z directions, let's say. So each of those are excited for a unit excitation, and we are saving out the FRFs in each of the FE packages. So in ANSYS, this would be a harmonic analysis that you would be performing. In Nastran, the equivalent name is solution 111. In Abacus, this would be a steady state dynamics. So once we have the FRFs, they get fed into the top green pad. Generally, when we do PSDs, we go from time domain to the frequency domain. So often we lose out the mean information because we don't have access to the original time series. So there is a requirement that a lot of the engineers might be required to go solve for, let's say, the bolt preloads or any mean stress effects that one might experience that's going to influence the fatigue life. So in that case, as long as we share the same mesh with the FE, we can bring in some static load cases, which could be like constant pressure, isothermal temperature conditions, or some bolt up stresses that you might want to superimpose on the PSD loading. So that can come in for the same model and be attached to the bottom green pad. So that takes care of the FE results coming in. And then we have to tell ENCODE what kind of excitation is this FRFs going to be paired with. So is it going to be a random PSD, a signed well, a sign on random, couple of options for sign, swept sign. So we have all these options available to define excitations. So these excitations could be defined in a lot of different ways. So we can get it from an Excel input, which is what some of the test data formats are, like a CSV file. We could also have original time series signal that could be converted to PSDs using the frequency spectrum glyph, and that could be an input to the vibration analysis glyph. We also have a vibration generator glyph, which will allow us to key in the actual values of the PSDs or sine sweep. If you were to give the rate and all the information, that can get fed into the vibration generator glyph, and that can form as an input to the vibration analysis glyph. And we also have this glyph called a vibration input, which has got certain predefined profiles based on ISO and MIL standards. So depending on your requirement, we could use any one of these to input the profile or the excitation and tell ENCODE to use them for fatigue calculations. So during the demo, I'll just show you a couple of them for you to get an idea of how things work. And probably the Excel and vibration generators are the most widely used in our customer base. And I'll also show you in the demo like how we can look at these options by just changing a couple of menu options in the software tool. So just to briefly talk about the difference between sine sweep and random PSD, if you're new to this area of the frequency domain side of things. So sine sweep is basically you are sweeping across the frequencies in here. Now you can do it at a constant amplitude, which is one form of sine sweep, or you can also vary the amplitude as you're sweeping through the frequency. And the sine sweeps happen at a definite rate, so you're defining the rate at which you're doing the sweep. This is often very widely used for resonance detection because you're doing one frequency at a time. So if you want to understand if a certain structure is going to excite at a given frequency, sine sweep is a great way to analyze that. And it's very widely used in the engine, powertrain industries to understand the dynamics of the system if you are not sure what frequencies the certain structure excites itself with. Then there is the random PSD, which is where you're exciting many frequencies at the same time. So this is often used for durability testing because you're trying to understand the worst case scenario, where if you have multiple modes or multiple frequencies excited at the same time, which is a classic case when you have road load. So if you hit a pothole, for example, you might have different systems that might behave differently based on what frequencies are excited due to the road loads. So random PSD is a great way to test that when you have multiple frequencies excited at the same time. Now, if you look at the analogy of this in a music a setting, which we are all familiar with. So if we take, for example, a piano playing all the different scales and chords, so sine sweep is like me playing one frequency at a time or one tone at a time. So that's one tone at a time. So you're not doing multiple tones. And in the random PSD, you're doing many tones at the same time in this. So generally, this is more damaging because if you end up having two or more frequencies that are very damaging and they are happening together, if they all happen to do a constructive one, then we could see more damage. Sometimes they might cancel out. But generally, it's a great way to find out whether if you're more than one frequency excited what would happen for in terms of the structure when we're looking at fatigue and durability. So both of these are very popular in the dynamics world. So depending on your condition and what's your end goal, so you might choose either or both the approaches. So we'll just look at sine sweep a little more in a couple of slides. So sine sweep, like I mentioned, we can do it in two forms. Either you're sweeping across the frequencies at a constant amplitude, or you're also varying the amplitude. So this is very widely used in the engine or the powertrain industry, where they're looking at certain frequencies that are excited due to the way the engine performs. So the beauty of the sine sweep is whether we are looking at it in time domain or frequency domain, this is always deterministic in nature. What I mean by that is if we know exactly the cycles or the rates at which we are sweeping, we can exactly calculate, even if you were to just give me a frequency domain sine sweep profile, we can calculate exactly in the time domain how that would look here. The advantage of this is because we have well-established protocol of doing fatigue calculations when we do time domain or a deterministic signal. So we can rain flow count it, we can go get the stress ranges and calculate lives. So we can even do it like a hand calculation or do a well-established rain flow counting and use that using ENCODE design life tools. So that's the big advantage with sine sweep or the sine dwell, where everything is deterministic in nature. So even if you give us in frequency domain, we can exactly tell you what the cycles are and what the cycle ranges are. So that's basically what is being summarized in this slide. So the sine dwell will provide a relationship between the amplitude, its frequency when you're exciting it, and how many times is it repeated. So all of it put together will give you a deterministic feel of how the cycles are distributed in this, since we know the rate and all the other information. So since it's deterministic, we can use all the classic rain flow counting methods to go establish what are the different cycle ranges, and then put it on the SN or EN curve to get fatigue, life, and damages. So that's one of the big advantages with sine sweeps because it's deterministic in nature. Now, in the case of random PSD, when we have multiple frequencies excited, things get a little tricky. Because when we are starting off with this time series signal and we convert that to a PSD, we have lost the element of time there. So we don't know whether we use 10 seconds of signal or we use 100 seconds of signal, or it could be 1 year of signal, right? So once somebody gives us the PSD profile, and if we have no access to the original time series signal, we don't know what was used to create this PSD profile. Okay, so that's one of the disadvantages when we look at the PSD, because it's very hard to go from this to this unless you have the complete information of the FFT and the phase and all that to reconstruct it back. So we have lost the element of time in that sense. Yes. Now, when we look at PSD in more detail in this, so we have different routes that one can take when we are doing the fatigue calculations in ENCODE. Now, one of the ways which is very widely used for PSDs is trying to correlate the fatigue lives that we could predict in ENCODE design life with that of a shaker table. Okay. So shaker table, so here is a picture which would basically, let's say we have a bracket in our car. So we would mount the bracket on the shaker table, excite it in one direction with the shaker, the PSD profile, and understand how long it's going to last for that given time, let's say 10 hours or 20 hours. Is it going to meet that requirement? Now, generally, these shaker tables are just uniaxial, so they excite only in one direction. So if we are dealing with three different axes, let's say X, Y, and Z, so we would basically have the fixture that is rotated by 90 degrees to go from X to Y, then from Y to Z. So in this case, we are not doing X, Y, and Z together. They are sequential, so one after the other. But in real life, when this bracket is actually mounted in the car, it's going to see X, Y, and Z together, so which we call it as simultaneous multi-axial loading. So that is 3 axes together. Now, as far as ENCODE is concerned, we can handle both these scenarios. The only thing we have to remember is maybe if a person is trying to correlate it with the test data, they might be forced to look at only one because they might not have test data for the second case because there are very few multi-axial shaker tape test rigs out there in the real world. That is the one which can do all the 3 axes together with the facing included. But ENCODE can handle both of these scenarios. So if we look at the first one, for example, the shaker table sequential, so this is one of the most widely used application of ENCODE design life and the frequency domain side of things. So basically, we again use the vibration glyph that I was talking about, and the 2 inputs to this is the FRFs, which is basically stresses for the unit excitation. So if you have X, Y, and Z directions, you're going to have a unit excitation in X, unit excitation in Y, unit excitation in Z. And we're going to save out the FRFs or the complex stresses in the FE codes, which form an input to the ENCODE. So that comes in as input. And then we have the test PSD, which is G squared per hertz. So one has to be careful here that the units have to exactly match. So if your test PSD is in G squared per hertz, you have to ensure it is unit excitation in Gs in your in your ANSYS or your Abacus packages. So once we sort that out, we bring these 2 inputs in, and ENCODE is going to now act like a virtual shaker tables, where it's going to take these 2 inputs, it's going to get you will see in the next slide, we're going to generate stresses as a function of frequency. We're going to cycle count that statistically, and then we're going to put that on the fatigue curves and get your life and damages. So you'll see a little bit of these details in the next couple of slides to see how that actually works. So this would be a setup that we would do for a shaker table kind of setting, where the lives and damages that we would get in design life, we could correlate with what we actually saw in this shaker table test. So we could correlate it with X, Y, and Z lives or all of it together. And like I mentioned before, we can also include static offset cases because the PSD on its own don't carry the mean. So you might bring in some static load cases to get the mean effects involved in our fatigue calculation. So again, this would be the glyph. The ANSYS results go into the top orange pad. The static results go to the bottom orange pad. So this is the unit excitation result going in. And then we have the PSD profiles defined in any one of them going in as inputs. So what is essentially happening behind the scenes in one slide, we'll not have time to get into the actual MAT details, is basically we are having the FRF, which is stresses across the part due to the unit excitation. So this is stress due to unit excitation. And then you have G squared per hertz, which is your PSD. So what ENCODE will do is it will go and square this. So you'll get sigma squared over 1G times G squared per hertz. So then all you end up with is sigma as a function of frequency. Okay, so this is what we refer to as stress PSDs. And that is now statistically counted. So since it's no longer deterministic in nature, we cannot do a rainflow counting, but there are well-established statistical counting techniques out there, and we have about 4 of them implemented here. So the Dirichlet and Lalanne is probably most widely used in the auto industry. If you're more on the electronic side, you might use the first 2 options. So there is enough information in our theory docs, and we also offer training courses on this subject. So that will take a deeper dive into the math behind the scenes and how we actually do these calculations. So we talk about it in both the training classes and in our theory guides. So once we do the cycle counting, then the rest of the calculations are similar to what we do in statics in terms of once we get the stress ranges, we put it on the SN and EN curve and then get lives and damages. So that's our overall protocol, what happens behind the scenes. So in terms of the flow setup, this is how it would look like. So if I have, let's say, excitation in X, Y, and Z, I would have FRFs for unit excitations coming from the FE code in X, Y, and Z. So those are complex stresses coming in here. They would get paired with each one of the PSDs, and I would assign SN or EN curves here, and then I would get damage and life answers. So the answers that we get here could now be correlated with what we saw in the shaker table. And I'll show you when I show the software, there is actually an exposure duration setting, which is basically where we provide the time element. Because when we do the shaker table tests, this profile is run for a specific time on the shaker table, like 10 hours or 20 hours. And we are trying to correlate it with that time when we are doing ENCODE design life calculations. Is it going to last that or not? So that time element can be entered here in seconds as one of the settings. So when I show the software demo, I'll point that out. And similarly, we can also do multi-axial, but this time it is simultaneous. Now, we might not be able to correlate it with the actual test, but we can actually do this in terms of computational calculation inside ENCODE Design Life. So the idea here is now the X, Y, and Z excitations are happening together on the component, which is what happens in the real world. We are just not able to do that in the test setup because our test setup has limitations of doing only one axis at a time. So that's the reason we talked about the first approach in the previous few slides. So now if you look at the multi-axial, which is 3 axes together in here, so it is actually a 2-step process. So for this, we start with the original time series signal, because the moment we are looking at X, Y, and Z simultaneous, we have to look at PSDs, and we have to also look at cross PSDs. That's the phasing between X and Y and Z. So let's say if I have 3 directions, which are the excitation directions X, Y, and Z. So we are looking at 3 PSDs here. So if I zoom in on the right, so if X, Y, and Z are my 3 input excitations, I'll end up with X, Y, and Z PSDs, and I'll end up with 6 of these, which are the cross terms. So that's the XY coupling, the YZ coupling, and the ZY coupling. So those are basically the 3x3 matrix essentially that we are constructing depending on the excitation. Now, if you have 10 loading points, let's say you have a big chassis frame, you're looking at 10 different loading points at different locations, you're essentially going to end up with a 10 by 10 matrix. Now, what ENCODE does is it basically has a tool. So if you're using versions before ENCODE 2021, there was a Python script that was essentially constructing all this and saving it out as an MPL file that can be referenced into a vibration analysis glyph for fatigue calculations. So starting ENCODE 2021, there is a new frequency response glyph that has got one of the settings called a multi-cross PSD. Essentially, it is doing the same calculations as this Python script, but it's much more efficient in terms of setting it up. So you just have one glyph that you're going to connect the time series to, and you're going to get an MPL output file that can be referenced into a fatigue calculations later on. So this would be the first step that we would do. So creating the PSDs and cross PSDs. And once we do that, we bring in this information like how we did the shaker table setup short while back. We again get the FRFs for X, Y, and Z. So nothing changes on the FE side. It's still X, Y, and Z independent, but now it is linked to the PSDs and cross PSDs. So the entire 3x3 matrix, so it'll be a long equation that will be analyzed behind the scenes, and we would get fatigue, life, and damages. So in terms of your setup, it would be on the FE side identical, same FRFs, but now you have an MPL file that's being referenced here, and that MPL file would look something like this. So if I go in and read the MPL file, it would be a 3x3 matrix with all the diagonal terms being the PSDs and the off diagonal terms being the cross PSDs. So that's essentially what would go on behind the scenes, and then we would do the fatigue calculations and get your lives and damages. So this will be the last topic, and then we'll open it up for a demo. So one of the other ways to get this FRFs is the modal routes. So it's basically the last box here. So far we were looking at direct FRF, which is basically getting all the complex stresses from the FE code. Now similar to modal transient in the time domain, we can also get the FRFs from the modal stresses and modal coordinates here. Now, the reason this is beneficial is if we understand the way direct FRF works, so we would do a harmonic analysis or an SSD or the equivalent name in Nastran, Abacus, and ANSYS. So that's going to give us a resultant file, which is going to have complex FRFs. So that's going to have real and imaginary. Now, in terms of the setup, this is very easy. But the big problem with this is if we have many directions, so let's say you have X, Y, and Z, you need one FRF in X, one FRF in Y, and one FRF in Z, and they would end up creating huge files. So I've had customers who are looking at like 100 gig files in X, 100 gig files in Y, and 100 gig files in Z. So that's like 300 gig files that ENCODE has to read and translate. So it's a long and a laborious process on the ENCODE side of things because it's trying to read big files. So an efficient way of doing this is modal FRF. So all we are doing here is we are going to run a modal analysis, which is going to give us modal stresses, which is a very straightforward analysis in the FE. Then we are going to do this harmonic analysis again, but the big change here is we do not save the stresses. It's the stresses that cause these file sizes to blow up and the calculations times to increase. So all we do in the harmonic analysis is we are saving out what we call the modal participation factors or modal scale factors. Very similar concept as modal transient. The only difference is this modal coordinates is in the frequency domain. So if you read this as a table, you will get real and imaginary values at every frequency step. In this, a very similar concept as modal transient, but just that these coordinates are in frequency domain. So if you are a Nastran user, these would be like punch files from your solution 111. If you're an Abacus user, this is going to be the GUPs. So you can see there is the P, which is the phase. So that's what gets saved out in the modal coordinates. And if you're an ANSYS user, this is modal coordinate files or MCF files that get saved out. Now what ENCODE is going to do is take these two results and build the FRFs inside Design Life. So there's a little bit of work that you do in FE, but you save a lot on the file sizes. So in fact, if to just give you an idea, these 100 gig files that I was talking about here might get reduced to 30 GB in total. So you get like a 1:10 or 1:5 kind of speed up when you're doing a model-based FRF. So, and the big advantage is if you have, let's say, instead of 3, if you have 10 loading points, you would need 10 FRFs in direct FRF. But here you just have one modal run and you just do 10 harmonic runs, but you're just saving out the modal coordinates. So you're dealing with smaller file sizes and lower computational times. So that's the big advantage with this approach. Okay, so with that, I have about 5 minutes left, so I'm going to open it up for a software demo, and then we'll come back to this summary slide. So I'm just going to bring up my software here. So we'll just do one example. So what I have here is basically a bracket model that I've brought in. So this bracket has been solved for. In this case, it's a direct FRF because it's a small model. So you can see we have stresses as a function of frequency. So you can see there is X direction. So it's going from 10 Hertz to all the way down. So if I keep coming down here, so we end with about 500. So in steps of 10 Hertz, we go from 10 to 500, and then we do Y directions, and then we have Z. So we have 3 FRFs that are coming in here, which are saving the complex stresses out. So somebody has done a solution 111 or an SSD to get these stresses out as a function of frequency. So that's our input. And as I mentioned before, that goes into the vibration analysis glyph, the top green pad. So this glyph here is basically available under the Design Life glyph palette. So you can find the vibration analysis glyph right here on the right. Okay. So all the way to the right, you find the vibration glyph. And we have 3 inputs here because I have 3 PSDs since I have X, Y, and Z. So this is the vibration generator glyph. So I was telling you there are about 4 different ways we can get the data in. We could end up in the input glyph palette at the right. We could use the Excel glyph to get it in a multi-column fashion. We could use the vibration generator, which is what we are using in this example. We also have the vibration input glyph that will do certain ISO profiles which are pre-built. So we can bring that in. And we can also convert time series data using a frequency spectrum glyph that falls under basic DSP. So in this case, we are using a vibration generator glyph. So you can see here in the advanced tab, you can set up whether you're doing random PSD, sine sweep in here. So if you do sine sweep, you can see it'll ask you for the test rate, the duration, and all those settings here. So once we provide that, it'll go calculate the cycles behind the scenes automatically. So in this case, we're doing a random PSD. If I go back here, so you can see these are G squared per hertz entered as a function of frequency. So we have entered that for X, Y, and Z, and all of that is fed in here. And now if I go here to, so we would have set up a material mapping. So I'm just going to skip that. It's just an SN or EN curve. If I just look at the load mapping, so you can see in this case, it's what we call a duty cycle setup because we're doing a sequential, that is X followed by Y followed by Z. So each event here, the X, Y, Z is independent in here, and we have a repeat count to it. Okay. If I just show you one of them, so if I just edit one event here, so you can see it has 3 FRFs here on the left available. So the 3 FRFs that we read from the FE, X, Y, and Z. So we're using one of them, which is the X direction FRF. That's being paired with the X-axis PSD on the right. Okay, so that's what is happening with the first event. The second event similarly would have the Y-axis FRF paired with the Y-axis PSD. And the setting that I was talking about in terms of the time, because I said the PSD, when you run it on the shaker table, you have a time element associated with it. So that time element is being put here in terms of seconds. Now here I've used 1 second. That means the PSD is happening for 1 second. And I have a repeat count of 900. So that means there I'm accounting for the 900 seconds. So we can either put 900 seconds here and put a repeat count of 1 there, or you put 1 second here, the repeat count of 900. It's one and the same. So all we are essentially telling ENCODE is how long is the PSD actually ran for in the shaker table, because we're trying to mimic that in the test setup here. So we have done these setups here. So since we are running out of time, so I'm just going to do a small group here instead of running the whole model. So I'm just going to make a small user group and import my group so that I just work with a small set of elements rather than running the whole bracket. So now when I run this, so ENCODE is going to take these FRFs, it's going to take these 3 PSDs, do all the math behind the scenes with all the cycle counting techniques that we have used, and then it's going to come back and give us the fatigue, life, and damage. Okay, so you can see all the life and damage answers here for that given component. And over here in the table, you're going to see for every location, it's going to report the RMS stresses and then life and damage answers as a table. So that's how we would use it in the software. So let's just quickly summarize and we'll open it up for Q&A. So what we looked at today was of vibration fatigue analysis using ENCODE Design Life, and we mainly focused on the frequency domain side of things for random and steady state loadings. So ENCODE can handle sine sweep, sine dwell, random PSD, and sine on random. We just looked at a couple of examples of sine sweep and random PSD in this talk. And we also carefully looked at establishing fatigue lives for a shaker table kind of environment, which is 3-axis sequential. And also we can do a multi-PSD kind of setup. So there is a nice worked example 10 that talks about this. We didn't have time to talk about these topics, but just remember that vibration fatigue can be used with a strain life solver. The default is a stress life solver, but you can replace a stress life with strain life. We can also extend this to welds, whether you model welds as shells or solids, both of them can be used with vibration loading. And we can do it with spot welds and also with short fiber composites. Okay, so all of this, what we talked about random PhDs and science sweeps, is applicable to this.